Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at how to set up the Kawasaki saddlebags. In this video we're going to look at how to set up these saddlebags. These are the Kawasaki factory saddlebags, which are made by Givi. I believe these are the same bags that are used on the Versys 650 and 1000, but for my setup I'm using these on the Ninja 1000 or the Z1000SX. I'm not going to do a review on these bags or really go into the details. That'll be in a later video. So if you're interested in seeing that or any other content about the Ninja 1000, make sure to subscribe. If you have any questions about anything that you're seeing, feel free to let me know in the comments. But we'll start by taking a look at the components that you need for the factory saddlebag set. There are a few different components you need to order to make sure you get the full set. The first set of components are the actual saddlebags themselves. They're the big black things there in the back. The next piece is the trim panels, which are these silver pieces here. And then a separate component is this little strip right here, which goes down on the side of the saddlebag. You also need the fit kit, which is everything you see here. And that's the parts that go on the bike for the saddlebags to actually mount. This is just the hardware that goes along with these. And then this is the one key kit. And these are the two lock cores that actually get keyed specifically to match your ignition key. So you have a single key that will start the bike as well as unlock the bags. And then you also get warning labels and various instructions. One thing to note is that there's no instructions for the lock set included. That's something that should otherwise be performed by the dealer. I was able to find the instructions online, and we'll walk through that process after we get the panels installed on these bags. We're going to start by mounting this color-matched cover panel on the top of the case. And there are 3 screws that go along the top, there, and then 2 screws on the bottom. The 3 screws on the top just use the single screws. The 2 screws that go on the bottom use these little plastic washers and O-rings. So I forgot to grab a screwdriver when I came out here to work today, but fortunately I always keep this tool underneath the seat. It's a Leatherman Wave, and then I have the extension set. So this is really handy. Alright, now the top panel is mounted. To mount this trim piece, there's no screws or anything. There's just 4 pieces of adhesive tape, and then you just press it down, and there's a little notch. You can see it right here. And there's a groove right here, so that helps you make sure you know that you've got it lined up. Before we stick this on, I'm just going to wipe it down with some rubbing alcohol to make sure that we get good adhesion. Alright, now the outside is done. Alright, I finished installing the panels on both bags, and now we'll take a look at how to install the fit kit on the bike. This fit kit has a few different components. There's this rubber block, which mounts just above the passenger foot peg. And then there's also these little stickers which mount in these holes, and they're marked rear left and front left, and then there's a set for the other side. Alright, so these things are actually kind of tricky to install. I don't think that if they're a little bit off, I don't think it really matters, but it's just kind of a tight space to work. It's hard to get them lined up right. Alright, now we're going to talk about how to get your saddlebag lock set up with your ignition key. What you see here is everything you need to set up one ignition lock. So the set actually comes with double of everything that you see here. You have the actual lock cylinder, a bag of springs, and then a set of tumblers. There are 4 different size tumblers, and to keep them separate, they put each size in a separate colored bag. And it's really important to keep those in the colored bag so that you don't get them mixed up. They're really hard to tell apart. In addition to this stuff, you'll need your ignition key, and it's also handy to have a pen and paper to write down some notes as you go. Alright, a few notes before we get started. This process is easy to do, but you have to follow all of the directions very precisely. So if you look down in the description, I have a link to my website with step-by-step instructions and photos, so you can use that as an additional reference if you actually need to go through this process. The other tip I have is make sure you have a nice clean work area with good light, because some of the parts that we're working with are really small, like these little springs, and they pop out very easily, so you want to make sure you don't lose anything. And before we get started, we'll just run through what the process is going to be like real quick. If you look at the lock cylinder, you'll see 5 slots, and each slot has a circle on the end, and they alternate. So there's 3 on top and 2 on the bottom, and then there's this last tumbler that's in here, and this one is fixed in place. And this is what the bottom looks like. What we're going to do is put springs in each of these cylinders, and then we're going to take, starting with 1 bag of tumblers, in this case we'll start with blue, and then you put the tumblers in, press the tumblers down, slide the key in, and all the tumblers, if there are any, that stay completely flush will stay in there. Any tumblers that are sticking out, and they can stick out in 2 different lengths, and I know this sounds kind of confusing, those will go out. The ones that are flush stay in, then we move on to the next color. And so within each bag, it's possible, for example, we'll start with blue. It's possible that none of these blue tumblers will be flush, meaning that none of them will be used, and it's possible that more than one will be used. And that's true for all of the colors. So you go through color by color until all of the tumblers that are in here are flush when the key goes in. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, we're going to get started by putting these springs in. So you get 5 springs out of the bag, and it comes with a few extra in case you lose any of these. Alright, there we go. So now we have all 5 springs in there. Alright, now we're going to start by putting in the first set of tumblers. In my case, I'm going to start with the blue bag. And if you look at the tumbler, you can see that it has a projection that comes out on one side. Where the projection comes out, you're going to put that over the spring. So we put the first one in like that. Okay, so now all the tumblers are resting in there and with the projections over the spring. The next thing we have to do, and this is important, is you press each tumbler down until it stays down like this one right here. Sometimes they'll pop back out, but you should be able to press them all down just like that. The next step, once all the tumblers are down, and you can keep your finger on them if you have to, is take your ignition key and press it in. It might take a little bit of force, and you can check on the bottom to make sure that the key has reached the end of the lock cylinder. Alright, we can see now that we have the key in. These tumblers, starting from this one is sticking out a little bit. These next 2 are sticking out a little bit more. And then the 2 after that are flush. And then this last one is just part of the lock cylinder, so you can ignore that. And if we look at the bottom, you can sort of see the same thing. Remember, the two on the end are flush, so you can see that they're totally flush on the bottom. And these first three on the right that were each sticking out a little bit, you can see that they don't come all the way down, so they're not flush on the bottom. So these two that are flush over here are going to stay in, and these three that are not flush over here are going to come back out. And you also want to note down somewhere that these last two are blue, because when you do the other lock cylinder, it's going to be exactly the same as this. So you don't have to go through this whole process again. You just put in tumblers from the blue bag into these last two slots. So put your finger over these so they don't pop out, and pull the key out. Then we're going to take out tumbler 1, 2, and 3. Tumblers 4 and 5 are going to stay in. And I found the best way to get these out is to use your key and press on the bottom of the tumbler, and you'll push it out the top. And if any of the springs come out, you can put them back in. Make sure you put your extra tumblers away so they don't get mixed up with any of the other colors. Alright, and then for the sake of time, I'm not going to do the rest of these in this video, but what you would do is you then go to the next color, where you could say green or whatever color, fill in the 3 slots that are empty, push the tumblers down, put the key in, and then if any of them are flush, those tumblers will stay in. The ones that aren't flush come back out, and then you move on to the next color. And you do that until all of the tumblers that are in the lock cylinder are flush when you put the key in. Alright, I finished going through all the sets of tumblers, and now my lock cylinder is done. So when I put the key in, you'll see that all of the tumblers are flush. And this is what you want. The next step is going to be to put this into the actual saddlebag. When you get your saddlebags, because there's no lock cylinder, you'll have this plastic piece in here which basically works as a key. You can unlock the bag and lock the bag. When we start this process, you want to make sure that the bag is in the locked position, and you can check that by trying to open the handle. Remove the key, and you're going to start with this with your lock cylinder. And again, based on the last process, all these tumblers should be flush with the key inserted. And as a quick note, this process is exactly the same for both the right and the left bag in terms of what direction you turn everything. So even though the bags are a mirror image of one another, when you're doing this process, the first turn is a clockwise turn, the second turn is a counterclockwise turn, and that's going to be exactly the same regardless of whether or not you're doing it on the right bag or the left bag. So we'll start by finding the last tumbler that is always sticking up, and we're going to put that in the 1 o'clock position, with this being the 12 o'clock reference point. So putting in at the 1 o'clock position, you're going to apply some light downward pressure and turn it about 90 degrees clockwise. And you see that the cylinder drops in a bit. You want to make sure that you don't turn it any further clockwise. At this point, you're going to keep applying downward pressure and turn it to the left. Turn it counterclockwise. Took some wiggling there to get it to stick. But now the cylinder is set. You can see the keyhole is oriented vertically. When we turn it, it unlocks. Turn it back and it locks. And that's it. Now your keys are set to match your ignition key. Alright, so here's how the bike looks with the bags mounted. And I'll have another video coming up pretty soon showing the insides of the bags, as well as dimensions, things like that. And make sure you subscribe if you're interested in seeing any other videos about the Ninja 1000. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or Anything else that you'd like to see?